Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Leading Yourself podcast. Today, we're diving into a topic that I believe can be a game changer for your professional journey, and that is the power of having career conversations with people that you admire. Today, we're going to dive into how to approach these conversations, and I'm going to share with you 20 questions that you can ask people you admire to help you as you progress on your professional journey. Welcome to the Leading Yourself podcast. This is your host, Carolina de Arriba. I'm an HR professional, health and fitness coach, wife, mom, and above all things, a goal-getter. In this podcast, we're going to be digging into all things leadership, professional and career development, habits, and relationships. This is a podcast for those who want to become the best version of themselves. Those who have big dreams and are willing to embrace the journey and put in the work to achieve them. My goal is to share with you the tools, tips, and tricks to help you in your journey. So let's dig into today's episode. They say success leaves clues, and I can't agree more with that. Today, we're going to dive into this topic of career conversations, and not any career conversations, but having career conversations with people that we admire. When we think about career conversations, typically we think about a conversation with our manager about our career. That's not what I'm talking about today, but I'm talking about how to connect with people that are ahead of us in the journey, people that we admire for different things, and how we can learn from them to help us in our own journey. You know, we all have those individuals we look up to, whether it's someone in your industry, maybe is a leader in your community or in the company that you work out, or even a mentor who's been there for you. But how often do you take the time to sit down and really engage with them, asking them questions that could unlock new insights, new perspectives, and new opportunities? Today, we're going to be exploring why these conversations are so powerful and how you can approach them. And of course, the tough questions you can ask that can truly make a difference. So let's start with the why. Why are these conversations so important? First of all, they provide you with a chance to learn from someone else's experiences, from their successes, but also their failures and everything in between. There's so much value in hearing from the lessons they've learned along the way, especially when it comes to navigating the ups and downs of a career. These conversations can also give you new perspectives. Sometimes we get so caught up in our day-to-day that we forget that there are other ways to approach challenges. Talking to someone that you admire can open your eyes to different strategies, new ideas, and even alternative paths that maybe you haven't considered. And then there's the inspiration factor. Hearing about someone's journey, especially if they've overcome obstacles that are similar to what you're facing, can be so motivating. It reminds you that you're not alone and that success is possible, even if the road ahead doesn't seem clear or seems even daunting. But here's the thing. Having these conversations isn't just about listening passively. It's about asking the right questions. And that's what I want to share with you today. If you're wondering what kinds of questions can lead to those deep, meaningful conversations, I got you covered. I put together a list of 20 powerful questions that can help you get the most out of the time with someone that you admire. And I want to share those questions with you. But before we dive into the questions, I want to say you don't have to use them all, right? These are examples. They're not a comprehensive list of all the questions that you can ask. I always believe that when you're having conversations with someone, you need your genuine curiosity guide you through that conversation, right? It needs to be really a dialogue where, yes, you're doing maybe 80% of the listening, but on that 20% that you're speaking, you're really engaged, speaking from what is in your heart and in your mind, and that you leave your curiosity lead the way, right? What is that you want to learn? what can be helpful. And so you can take the most advantage of the time that you have with this person that you admire. And even before we go there, I have to say something. I think I shouldn't have to, but I'm going to remind you that you can reach out to anyone to ask to have a career conversation. And I say this because there was a time in my career where I felt that I was not worthy of scheduling time with certain people that I admire because they were so far away from where I was, right? Maybe up in the hierarchical line and I was intimidated, or there were people that I had not personally met and I had admired from the distance. But I'll tell you, don't be afraid, right? If you really admire someone and you really have that genuine interest in learning from that person, schedule some time, reach out to that person, right? Schedule, 15, 20 minutes, half an hour. Invite that person for coffee or for a meeting where you can connect and really express what is the intent of the meeting and what is that you're trying to get out of it. What I've learned in my life and in my career is that as human beings, our favorite topic of conversation is ourselves. And people, especially as they go through their career, they develop an interest in paying forward because we all have had someone, even if we had the most challenging journey in our career, we always have people along the journey who have helped us. And as we progress in our journey, we want to be that person for someone else. And we love to talk about ourselves. So see it as a gift to the person you're asking to have this conversation. I'm sure that anyone you approach and ask to have a conversation like this, where you show, again, your genuine interest in learning from them because you admire them, they will be honored to invest some time and talk to you and share with you their experiences. All that being said, I want to share 20 questions that you can use in these career conversations. And again, you can pick and choose or you can come up with your own questions, but I thought if I share a few, they can inspire you to think about how you can prepare for these meetings. I've learned actually from John Maxwell. I was listening to him once and he said that he spends double the time preparing for a meeting than the time that the meeting actually takes. And that's something that stuck with me and I use especially in conversations like this. If you are going to ask someone that you admire to invest their time in sharing with you, the best way to show your respect and your admiration for that person is to come prepared to that conversation. So if you're scheduling 30 minutes with this person, spend an hour preparing for the meeting, thinking about what is that you want to learn from this person? What questions do you want to ask them? And not doing it with rigidity of saying, these are the questions that I'm going to ask and I'm going to go in this particular order. I'm going to stick to a script. I'm not saying that, but thinking through really what you want to get out of it and setting intentions for that meeting, you'll see that if you do it, you're going to take tenfold what you're putting in at the end of that discussion. So really invest the time in preparing, in thinking through, right? And thinking what questions you want to ask. And then when you're in the conversation, allow the conversation to flow. So it's, yes, preparation, but then also the flexibility when you're in the conversation to follow your own curiosity and let go with the flow of the conversation. Okay, now let's dig into those questions. The first question, one question that I love to ask people is, what is the most important lesson that you've learned in your career? I think a lot of times we go through our career so quickly that we don't stop to reflect on the lessons that we're learning along the way. And the thing is that I believe the most important lessons that we learn typically come out of challenging situations. So when you ask this question and someone can share with you those lessons, now they're helping you expedite your learning and they're helping you go through maybe a similar challenging situation faster, because now you have a piece of knowledge that they didn't have when they went through that situation. So for me, this is one of my favorite questions to ask, because I think a lot of times we focus so much on the successes and the highlights. And for me, all of that doesn't have the value if it doesn't come along with the lessons that we learn along the journey. So the first question, what is the most important lesson you've learned in your career? The second question is, how did you navigate major career transitions or changes? If you're someone who are looking to make a change, this can be a great question to ask someone you admire. Or if you're currently going through that transition, it can really help you get a different perspective and think and see things through a different lens as you're going through your own transition or you're planning your own transition. Another one of my favorite questions, if you know me, you know, what habits or routines have contributed most to your success? I personally believe our success is built with the choices that we make every single day, the decisions we make every single day. And the foundation of that is our habits and our routines. I'm so big into habits and routines. I'm always looking to learn other people's habits and routines because I rely a lot on those. So this is one of my favorite questions as well. What habits or routines have contributed most to your career? The fourth one is, what advice would you give to someone just starting out in their career? This question is more for those of you who are starting on your career, right? A lot of times as we are starting our career, we don't know what we don't know. But how about asking people that are along this journey from you and who have been successful? What advice would they have? If they could go back in time, what would they do differently? That's another way to ask that same question. Another question that I really like is, how do you handle setbacks or failure? We all know that setbacks, that falling down is part of the journey. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when they're going to happen. And personally believe that the key is, it doesn't matter how many times you fall or how many setbacks come your way, is how you can be resilient and how quickly you can stand back up. So how you handle setbacks or failures, another one of my favorite questions. Another question you can ask is, what strategies do you use to stay motivated and focused? I know for me, sometimes it's hard to stay focused. So I'm always looking for tips. I really like this question. I think if you want to make progress in your career, you require that motivation and that focus. So what can you learn from these other people, right? So the question, what strategies do you use to stay motivated and focused? Number 7 is, can you share an example of a difficult decision you had to make and how did you approach it? This is all about decision making, another critical skill for success. And I think there are different ways and different perspectives from which you can tackle a decision. And I'm always trying to work on how I make better decisions. So I like to learn from others, how do they approach it? And this is typically the question I ask when it comes to decision making and learning about decision making. I think a lot of times we all have a theoretical answer to this question, but I personally like to hear the experience, the example. So the question once again is, can you share an example of a difficult decision you had to make and how you approach it? Number 8 is, what skills do you think are essential for success in your field? You know, the world is shifting to being this skill-led way of leading our careers, right? It's not longer about the jobs you have, but what skills you possess and how you can apply them to help you continue to grow and help you continue to make an impact in any team or organization that you're part of. And we're hearing more and more about skills. I'm in the space of HR and I'm in the space of talent management and talent development. And this is like a daily conversation we're having of making this shift. We even hear skill is the new currency. in the career market, right? You as a candidate, you as an employee, you as a talent, what you can offer is your skills. And I like this is a great question. What skills do you think are essential for success in your field? And it's a question which answer is constantly changing because all industries today are shifting with the influence of technology and artificial intelligence and all of these things, and just the way the world is evolving and the different industries is evolving. So it's a question that even if you ask the same question to the same person, like 2, 3, 5 years apart, you're going to get completely different answers or partially different answers. I think there's some foundational skills that will always come up, but there's some that will always be changing. So it's a great question to have on your back pocket for these kinds of conversations. We're on number 9. How do you balance your personal life with your demanding career? I know this is something, the one question I get asked a lot when I have conversations with other people who seek me as a mentor or as a coach, and they ask me this question frequently. And I think it's a really valid and powerful question. Because I think finding that balance, which I don't think it really exists, I think it's more an integration than a balance, but that's a topic for another conversation. But I think it's a matter of trial and error, and we all need to find our own recipe for this. But hearing what other people are doing and looking for inspiration in others can be really valuable, especially if you're currently struggling to find that quote unquote balance in your life and in your career. Okay, we're halfway through question number 10. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing your industry today? How are you preparing for it? I love this question. I'm always curious about business, and this is a question I love to ask because we all form our own opinions and we make our own assumptions, and I like to hear about people that I admire on their points of view so I can broaden my view, I can broaden my perspective, and I continue to work on my business acumen. Number 11, if you could go back and change one thing in your career, what would it be? This is another of my favorite questions. There are a lot of my favorite questions in this list. I have to admit this. But, for me, one of my fears is regret. The regret that I didn't do something at one point, or that things I would have made a different decision. And to be honest, when someone asks me that in my career, what could I go back and change? My answer is always nothing, because I wouldn't be where I am if I didn't took the path that I took or made the decisions that I made. But I think this question, for me personally, makes me reflect a lot. And I love to hear what other people have to say about this. And maybe it's not that you would change it, but sometimes is what are things that you wish you had tackled differently. Anyways, it's another question for your back pocket. I always get blindsided when someone asks me this question because I never have a good answer to it. And I really admire people who can answer this question. And I always learn a lot from people who answer this question. Number 12 is, how do you continue to grow and develop professionally? Especially in today's world, we can't stop learning and we can't stop growing. If we want to stay current and we want to stay competitive and we want to continue to make an impact. And if you know me and you're listening to the podcast for a while, you know that personal development and professional development are very important to me. And I'm always looking for inspiration on what others are doing that maybe I can be inspired by in order to continue to grow myself in my journey. Number 13, what role have mentors or coaches played in your career? I think that doesn't need any explanation. Number 14, how do you define success, both professionally and personally? This is another of my top favorite questions, because I think we all have this assumption of success and we use the word success almost like a buzzword in every conversation we have. Success here, success there. Yes, we all are seeking for success, but we're all seeking for something different because we all have a different definition of success. And I am always really curious to see how these people that I admire define success. What does it mean for them? So another one of my favorite questions. Number 15, what advice would you give for building and maintaining a strong professional network? You know, your network is one of your most important career assets. I personally believe that, and we constantly need to nourish and build our network. So this is another question that I like to ask because as an introvert, it's always challenging for me and I need to be very intentional when I'm building my network. So getting inspired and getting ideas from people that I admire is always very, very helpful. The question was, what advice would you give to building and maintaining a strong professional network? Number 16, what do you consider your greatest professional achievement and why? And I think if you dare to ask this question, you're going to be always surprised with the answer you get. I won't say anything else, but personally, every time I ask this question, I am assuming or thinking they're going to say something based on what I know. And I always get surprised, and always for a good reason. So try this one for sure. What do you consider your greatest professional achievement and why? Number 17, how do you stay ahead of industry trends and changes? I think I touched on this one a little bit. It has to do with that professional growth. I think industry trends are very important, right? Because that can really influence the decisions we make, the direction we go, how we approach things inside our own team, our own company. And I always try to be on top of, but a lot of the people that I admire do a better job than me. Not only they're on top of, but they're ahead of. So asking this question always it's helpful. And, you know, ahead of those industry trends is by listening to these people that you admire that are already doing it, and you can learn from them. Okay, we're getting close to the very few last questions. Number 18, what sacrifices have you made in your career and were they worth it? I think this is one question that I tend to save towards the last part of those conversations. It requires building a little bit of courage and trust to ask this bold question. It's definitely a bold question, but it's one that I also like to ask depending how the conversation flows. What sacrifices have you made in your career and were they worth it? And especially if you feel that right now you have to make sacrifices in order to support and focus on your career, if you feel in the midst of that and it's challenging you and maybe it's overwhelming you or maybe it's even painful to think about those sacrifices, this can be a great question to ask to someone. Number 19, how do you manage stress and maintaining a mental well-being in a high-pressured environment? Most of the people that we tend to admire work in high-pressure environments. Maybe I think that's true for myself. Maybe it's not true for you. But for me, most people that I admire, they excel in these high-pressure environments. And for me, it's important because my mental health is very important and your mental health is very important. So a great question to ask as well. And the last one, this is the question that I like to use to end all my career conversations with people that I admire. And that is, what legacy do you hope to leave behind in your career? This question in itself can be the conversation in itself. You can spend the entire time just on this question. And it's, again, one of my top favorite questions. And I know I say that about a lot of these, but it's a great way to end the conversation or one question conversation that you can have with someone. I always leave these types of conversations so inspired in general, but this question really always inspires me. And maybe it's because I'm very driven by that. Like, I do want to leave a legacy. And if you too want to leave a legacy, this might be a question that can leave you feeling energized and inspired as well. These questions are designed to spark meaningful dialogue and help you uncover insights that you might not get through a more superficial conversation. They encourage the person that you admire to reflect on their journey, share their wisdom, and offer advice that is rooted in their real world experiences. That's why I think they're so... and I'm going to give you again all 20 questions. And you can email me and I'll email you the list of questions. You can contact me either in LinkedIn, on Instagram. You find me as at Leading Yourself Podcast. Or my email is leadingyourselfpodcast@icloud.com. And I'll send you the list of questions. But here we go again. Number 1, what is the most important lesson you've learned in your career? Number 2, how did you navigate major career transitions of changes? Number 3, what habits or routines have contributed most to your success? Number 4, what advice would you give to someone just starting out in their careers? Number 5, how do you handle setbacks and failures? Number 6, what strategies do you use to stay motivated and focused? Number 7, can you share an example of a difficult decision you had to make and how did you approach it? Number 8, what skills do you think are essential for success in your field? Number 9, how do you balance your personal life with your demanding career? Number 10, what do you think is the biggest challenge facing your industry today and how are you preparing for it? Number 11, if you could go back and change one thing in your career, what would it be? Number 12, how do you continue to grow and develop professionally? Number 13, what role have mentors or coaches played in your career? Number 14, how do you define success, both personally and professionally? Number 15, what advice would you give for building and maintaining a strong professional network? Number 16, what do you consider your greatest professional achievement yet and why? Number 17, how do you stay ahead of industry trends and changes? Number 18, what sacrifices have you made in your career and were they worth it? Number 19, how do you manage stress and maintain mental well-being in a high-pressure environment? And number 20, what legacy do you hope to leave behind in your career? So, how do you approach someone you admire and ask for the time? We talked about this before. I want to wrap up with the podcast. First, be respectful on their schedule. Start by reaching out with a clear and concise message. Let them know why you admire them, what you hope to gain from the conversation, and how much time you're asking for. Be as specific about what you want to talk about. This shows that you're serious and that you've done your homework. When you get the chance to have that conversation, be fully present, listen actively, take notes, and ask for follow-up questions. Remember, this is a two-way street. So be sure to express your gratitude and let them know how their insights have helped you. And finally, don't let the conversation end when the meeting does. Follow up with a thank you note, stay in touch. Building a relationship with someone you admire can be incredibly valuable as you progress in your career. And that's it. That's what I have for you today. I hope that you're feeling inspired to reach out and have those important conversations. Remember, the people you admire were once in your shoes, and they're often more than willing to share their wisdom. If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure that you subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who might benefit from this content. And until next time, I hope you have a great week ahead, and I'll talk to you next week for another episode of the Leading Yourself Podcast.